Please welcome to the stage Skift Research Analyst, Ashab Rizvi.
I understand this is the post-lunch spot, arguably and biologically the toughest for any presenter out there. So let me make a promise up front. This is not going to be another macro forecast. This is also not going to be a dry data walkthrough. What we're going to do instead in the next few minutes, we're going to talk about and challenge some of the biggest misconceptions about air travel with actual data. And along the way, what we'll try to do is maybe break a few industry myths. All right, let's get started. Okay, so today we're going to talk about our 4 big myths that are shaping airline strategy right now. We'll talk about if premium is still driven by business travel. We'll talk about if low cost in the US is struggling or dying. We'll talk about if flyers love airline loyalty programs. And we'll also talk about, and this is the most controversial one, if sustainability is dead and has practically lost all momentum. So let's get started with the biggest misconception of them all, that premium is still a corporate story. All right. Okay, now let me say something. This has a lot of information out there, and my boss actually hates me when I put on multiple data points on a single slide, but hear me out, because they're all telling the same exact story. Let's start with Europe. Let's start with Air France-KLM. They reported a 5% yield improvement in their premium economy cabins. Let's go over to the other side of the Atlantic. Delta's premium cabin revenues have grown over by nearly 50% since 2019. Let's talk about the largest international airline in the world, and that's Emirates. Their premium capacity today is flying at an astonishing 73% load factor. 3 different airlines, 3 different hubs, very different business models, but they're all telling the same exact story, that travelers are choosing to pay more for a better experience. And that choice is not just happening in the US, it's happening increasingly in the Middle East, increasingly in Europe, and in Asia Pacific. And here comes the more interesting part. According to the US Travel Association, business travel spending in the US is still only at 86% of 2019 levels. But what about globally? Well, GBTA says that 2025 will be the biggest year when it comes to global travel spending. But once adjusted for inflation, even that number is down by nearly 40% compared to pre-pandemic. So structurally, business travel spending is still lower than what it used to be pre-pandemic. Now let's look at the math here. So business travel spending is low, but premium cabins are producing record revenues and record occupancy. So who's filling the front of the aircraft? So the math doesn't check out. So it's the premium leisure traveler that's filling in. And it's not just the data. Airline executives across the world are acknowledging, and especially US airline executives. Well, United in Q1 said that they have seen no deterioration in high-end consumers' willingness to purchase a premium experience. JetBlue echoed that sentiment. Air Canada echoed that sentiment. But my favorite quote comes from Frontier of all airlines, a ULCC. They said that they've observed in the US a huge change in the appetite for leisure travelers to pay for first-class seats. Now, when ULCC executives start acknowledging a trend, that is structural in nature. So premium today isn't just a corporate story. It's increasingly driven by discretionary travel spent by leisure travelers. So that begs us another question. What's really happening on the other side of the market, on the ultra low-cost side? And here's the interesting thing. When people say low cost is dying, they generally refer to the US in particular, because globally the picture looks very different. In fact, in Q3 of this year, 4 of the 6 most profitable carriers in the world were, guess what, low-cost carriers. From Ryanair and Vueling in Europe to Indigo in Asia Pacific. These carriers on average produced a 1.5x the margin of full-service carriers. So no, low-cost business model isn't broken. In fact, it's printing money worldwide. So let's talk about the more interesting region, which is the US. Now, a lot of airline executives love to talk about the death of the ultra low-cost business model in the US. And if that were true, we wouldn't see this. Here is a 6-quarter progression of operating profit margins of 3 US LCCs. There is Breeze, Sun Country, and Allegiant. Have a look at this chart. Sun Country producing double-digit margins, Allegiant consistently in the green, and Breeze going from -6% last year Q2 to +4% in this year Q2. That's a 10-point swing in just 1 year. Now, these airlines didn't just survive by luck. They survived by building networks with little overlap with legacy carriers and by building their overall business model that had diversified revenues. But here's the reason. Here's another thing. If some ULCCs are doing very well, why are others struggling? And here's the reason why. Since 2019, ULCC unit cost, or CASM ex fuel as we call it, that has grown by nearly 40%, 41% in fact. And at the same time, their TRASM growth or revenue growth has only grown by just 3%. Now, no business model on earth can survive cost expansion outpacing revenues 13:1. This isn't a demand problem. This isn't a consumer problem. This is a structural economics problem. You can't run a $39 fare game when your unit cost curve looks something like this. Now, legacy carriers at the same time, they have protected their yields through loyalty economics and through premium monetization. But ULCCs, as Jay pointed out earlier, they say that they don't have access to any of those levers. So what is the way forward? What we've done is we've created a grid that essentially shows that there are still two winning low-cost business models in the US. There is the niche local optimizers, the Avelos, the Breeze, and the Sun countries, where they have carved their own defensible turf, flying where others don't. They go to secondary airport, and then there are the hybrid monetizers, the JetBlues and the Alaskas and increasingly Southwests of the world. They have better loyalty economics, they are adding premium seats, and they have more monetizable products. The overstretched ULCC is under pressure. The ULCC 1.0 business model, that is facing the full wrath of cost inflation and network competition. So the only path to survivability for those group is you either go hybrid or go niche. You either go premium light or you go exclusive routes. And to be blunt, the ULCC that survives, the one that evolves will survive, the one that sits back will effectively disappear. Now, speaking of evolution comes our third point, a third myth, which is travelers love airline loyalty. Now, here's something to start with, something uncomfortable for all the loyalty teams in this room. We often tell ourselves that airline loyalty, passengers love airline loyalty, and that earning miles and earning status is the fundamental motivator for joining airline loyalty programs. Now, the data tells a completely different story. In 2019, a survey said about 66% of all travelers were enrolled in at least one airline loyalty program. That number today is just 39%. That's a stunning drop. And look who's checking out the fastest. It's the younger generation, the Gen Z and millennials. They're the ones who will represent the lion's share of air travel spend by the end of this decade, and they're the least interested in joining any airline loyalty program right now. And that tells me one thing, that airline loyalty as it is designed today, it's losing relevance with the next generation of flyer. So why is that disconnect happening? Well, here's the starkest mismatch in any data set that I've seen all year. About 92% of all loyalty operators believe that their program offers utility and value, but only 52% of all travelers agree. That's not a small delta. That's a 40-point reality distortion. So naturally, we wanted to dig deeper. We wanted to understand where this breakage in loyalty is happening. And some of the reasons that came out were pretty interesting to us. We asked travelers why they decided to go outside their preferred loyalty programs to book flights. And about 45% said flight availability and schedule was more important. Again, in that moment, they wanted value. About 36% said that they were able to get a price that was more affordable elsewhere. And about 1 in every 3 travelers, about 33% said that the program benefits and perk that their program was offering them was simply not relevant to their trip. So the biggest motivator for airline choice, it's not miles. It's convenience, price, and relevance, and in that order, not loyalty. Loyalty is just one of the many negotiable inputs. But hey, I'm not going to suggest that loyalty is dead. In fact, far from it. If travel loyalty managers focus on real tangible values and additions, travelers will engage. Now, we've seen loyalty evolving from an emotional identity to becoming more functionally relevant, and sustainability is mirroring the same exact pattern. So I'm a numbers guy. I'm going to give you some numbers against what was being said earlier today. So a key sustainability metric is the usage or increased usage of sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. Let's look at the step changes or increased usage of SAF in some of the biggest airlines in the world. Have a look at this one. IAG went from using 54 kilotons to 162 kilotons of SAF in just 1 year, a 3x increase. Delta went from 10 to 41, a 4x increase. United practically doubling its SAF usage. in just 1 year. Now, these aren't symbolic sips of SAF for headlines. These are real operational uptakes happening behind the scene in procurement, fleet fuel certification. And if airlines today are using more SAF, then naturally the supply or the production should be there. And here's the good news, because historically, a big challenge with SAF has been its production. Have a look at this chart. SAF production in the last few years, well, has exploded. Between 2022 until 2025, SAF production has nearly doubled every year. In fact, from 2023 to 2025, SAF production has gone up by 4.5x, from 600 million liters to 2.7 billion liters. And here's the caveat. Despite this acceleration, despite this progress, SAF still represent under 1% of the total jet fuel production today. So sure, there is progress, there is a lot of acceleration, but there's a runway ahead before SAF meaningfully replaces fossil jet fuel. Now, SAF isn't the only available sustainability lever for airlines. What we're seeing increasingly happen in Europe is decarbonization through network redesign, not just by fuel type. So what we're seeing increasingly happen in Europe is a lot of intermodality agreements coming up between airlines and rail operators. We have seen Air France-KLM partner with SNCF. We have seen Lufthansa's partnership with Deutsche Bahn, even Emirates partnering with USS Brightline and Spain's Renfe. The impact has been short-haul flights, especially in Europe, have come down by nearly 17% compared to 2019. The strategy is clear. Rail takes care of short-haul feeder flight. Aviation takes care of long-haul flights. And that is what sustainability in the second generation looks like. That is sustainability 2.0. That is context-smart, multimodal, and efficient. Now, to wrap it up, none of the narratives or the assumptions about air travel really hold against data. Premium isn't just corporate anymore. It's increasingly leisure-driven. ULCCs aren't dying, aren't struggling. They are, in fact, evolving into hybrid or niche carriers. People don't love loyalty. In fact, loyalty is not automatic. People will always, travelers will always love relevance and utility more than loyalty. And sustainability, it's not dead. It just moved away from PR and slogans towards operational excellence. And that's it for me. Thank you so much for joining this session. I really hope you found some meaning and value into this session. If you've disagreed with any of the myths, well, there's an evening reception. You can find me and we can have this conversation again. Thank you so much.